All right, so just kind of continue. So what basically ended up happening is I discovered the theory of everything. I showed my parents. My parents didn't believe it. My parents visited me. I had to move my stuff at San Diego, at UC San Diego. I had to move because it was like, I don't know if it was spring break. I forget what break it was, but I had to bring my stuff back to my place. And that was a day that I lost at least 30 basketball DVDs. But like I said, kind of what was going on at the time was my grandpa was teaching me his metapsychiatry stuff, and I didn't really understand it. But like I said, at the time I was a leftist. So my grandpa was teaching me, like, if you're in the flow, you're not attached to anything, right? So I like that because as a leftist, I'm like, yeah, we shouldn't be attached to anything because, you know, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, being attached to stuff, that's like white people, you know, and that's capitalism and being attached. And everybody should just, you know, we should all just give up our wealth and just, you know, and we should all be equal and you know, because I was kind of a Marxist and I wanted the white people to give up their wealth to the people of color, because I think it's because I saw myself as Jewish and I always kind of looked down upon white people. So I would take my grandpa's teachings, but I would, you know, I would mold them and I would morph them into my ideologies, into my leftist ideologies. So my grandpa's telling me that, you know, don't be attached to anything. So, but ironically, so I had a lot of good basketball DVDs, right? And because my grandpa's like, yeah, don't be attached to anything, my mom and dad helped me to move my stuff. They helped me to pack. But then, like I said, I showed my parents the quadrant model. My dad said, this is schizophrenia. My mom's like, oh my God, you have schizophrenia. You need to see it. You know, you need to see a doctor. Ah! And then, like I said, because I've been abused so much, my hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is kind of off. So I started to yell at them, hey, I'm not schizophrenic. Get out of here. And you would too, or not everybody would, but a lot of people would if your mom's saying, you need to start taking medicine. You need to see a doctor. And I'm like, no, I don't need to see a doctor. I discovered the theory of everything. So I'm yelling at them though, right? So they end up leaving. And to this day, I try to see my mom and dad. And I would tell my mom, Mom, can I please see you and dad? No. And I'd be like, and I try to tell her, I was like, okay. She says, if you see, you're just going to yell at us and you're just going to fight us. And I'm like, okay, when was the last time I saw you guys? And last time I saw you guys, did I yell at you and fight you guys? So she'd say, yeah, remember in college, the last time we saw you, you yelled at us and I was like, yeah, because I showed you the quadrant model. I discovered the theory of everything. I showed it to you and you said I'm schizophrenic. And yes, I was yelling at you guys to leave, but that was 2010. That was 20 years ago. That was 15 years ago. And I was like, well, yeah, you were yelling at us then. But that wasn't the last time I saw them, though. But I'll get to that more. But my mom is just immature and stupid. But I'll continue with this. So anyways, I lost a lot of basketball videos that day because my mom and dad left. And because they left, I had a big box of basketball DVDs. And because my grandpa was teaching me about, like, you know, if you're in the flow, you're not attached to anything, right? So I was like, okay, so I'll be in the flow and I'm not going to be attached. But again, I interpreted that through a leftist wing, like, yeah, we should all not be attached. We should all give up our wealth freely, right? But so, you know, I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to be attached, so I'm just going to leave a bunch of these DVDs, like a whole box full of DVDs. I lost like 30 DVDs. If people would have seen those DVDs, they would have known how good at basketball I was. These were games of when I was like, when I was 12 years old, in the 7th grade and stuff, making like 4 3-pointers or more a game and stuff. But like I said, I want to study the DVDs. But at the time, I didn't really care that much. Because I was thinking to myself, because at the time I didn't understand the swag flow, so I'm not going to get to that. But at the time, I was just trying to study my shot. But at the time, I was like, you know what? At the time, I was like, I don't even care about basketball anymore, because I didn't even think I was going to continue playing basketball. At the time, I discovered the quadrant model. I'm thinking, I'm going to be a famous, because of the quadrant model, and also I had a lot of rap music, and at the time I didn't, because I just quit basketball, I didn't know that I needed to play basketball in order to write raps, because I didn't know that I could only write raps when I'm nervous. So at the time, I was just like, you know, I thought I'm not even gonna play basketball anymore. That's the way I thought. So, and I was like, I'm just gonna be a famous rapper and I'm gonna get this quadrant model big and everything's gonna be fine, right? That's the way that I saw it. But I had that box of DVDs. I was just like, you know what? I was thinking to myself, I'm not attached to anything. But again, my grandpa would say, yes, I was attached. And this was my ego. I wasn't in the flow. It was not a good idea for me to leave the box of basketball DVDs. But at the time, like I said, I didn't care about the basketball at the time. I was just like, whatever. You know, I'm not attached to anything. I'm just going to leave the box and I'm going to leave. So I left a ton of stuff in my apartment and I just left. Because my parents, they abandoned me. Because I yelled at them, hey, I don't have schizophrenia. I discovered theory of everything. My mom was like, oh my God. Ah. Because I was yelling at them. And again, was this because my hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is, because of all the abuse that I went through, my hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is kind of out of whack. So if I'm being mistreated or I'm being talked down to like my mom was, I start to yell because it's kind of it's uncalibrated. Like it's kind of I'm kind of on edge. So that little bit. So I was yelling at my mom, and then my mom and dad got really scared because I was yelling at them so other people could hear. And I went outside and I was even acting crazy because my mom and dad were like, you know, you're schizophrenic, you need to take medicine. I got really upset because I'm like, no, I don't need to take medicine. I discovered theory of everything. What are you guys talking about? This is theory of everything. You guys are stupid. But my mom was like, you need to take medicine. Oh my God, you need to see a doctor right away. I'm like, no, I don't. What is your problem? So I'm yelling at them. And then they left. And then they made me pack my stuff by myself. So then that's when I lost a bunch of like 30 DVDs. But like I said, at the time, I didn't really care that much. I didn't care so much that I lost all the DVDs because I was just thinking to myself like, whatever, I'm just going to be a famous rapper. I'm going to, you know, and I'm going to be, you know, and I had to discover the quadrumile, so it's okay. So I just left all the basketball DVDs and I just left, right? And so then, like I said, later I would discover, it was like a year later, I would discover that I could only write raps when I'm playing serious basketball. So I tried to get back into playing basketball and I couldn't get back into basketball. But also, it was a year later that I discovered the swag flow. So that was another one of the main reasons why I wanted to get the basketball DVDs, but I'm not going to describe what the swag flow was. But so my point is, so this happened, right? But at the time, I was a very big time leftist, like I said. So my main thing was I was anti-white. I was an anti-white leftist. I think it's because I saw myself as Jewish and I look down upon white people. So, but so I kind of, my grandpa taught me these things, but I always incorporated them or interpreted them within my leftist framework. So my grandpa's teach, like I said, don't be attached to anything. If you're in the flow, you're not attached to anything. So I'm interpreting that as, yeah, let's all not be attached. Let's all be Marxists. And because I wanted the white people to give up their attachments to the people of color, right? And like another thing my grandpa would teach is like, you know, transcend dualistic software. So I'm like, yeah, transcend dualistic. There is no white and black. So let's all race mix. But that in and of itself was dualistic software because I saw myself as Jewish. So transcending dualistic software, now I know, but at the time I didn't know, is transcending the self and the idea that you are a self and there is others. So if you transcend the self, then you can see things as they truly are. Now I understand that. It took me to like 2020 to read Dr. Horror's books to understand that because my grandpa was a bad teacher. So when my grandpa would talk about transcend dualistic software, I'd be like, yeah, transcend dualistic software. Let's all race mix. There is no white. There is no black. There is no male. There is no female. Yeah. So let's all just race mix. And yeah, no, the conservatives are evil who say that women should, you know, that men and women are different. No, transcend dualistic software. But if you're in the flow, you can discern differences and you can discern, you know, what is it? Nuances and you can discern that so my grandpa would later teach me that everything is one, but not everything is equal. But I wanted to be like, yeah, transcend dualistic software, everything's equal. Because I was just a leftist and I was anti-white. So yeah, I hated, you know, conservatives because I thought that they were like Nazis. And yeah, they just want to make women, they just want to say that men and women are different because they want to make women a baby maker so they can maintain the white race. That's the way that I saw it. So I was a leftist, right? And so like I remember when I was with people at UCSD, like I was sitting with this group of kids and you know the kids seemed kind of racist against black people, right? But you know, but they were kind of like ironically like they looked kind of ethnic, right? But I was like, you know, like one of them was like kind of Russian, but he had kind of big lips, and the other one was like kind of like half Asian, right? But I was like, the difference between the difference between white people black people is, we're all, 99.9% the same genetically, or 99.7% the same, that there is, that racist social construction. Because and like I said, but I was thinking, I see things as they really are, and they're biased and they're racist, and they don't see things as they really are because of their egos. So I'm thinking that I'm following my grandpa's teachings. I've transcended the ego, but really, now I know it's because I saw myself as Jewish, and I was always anti-white, and I wanted race mixing, but at the time I didn't know that. So I'm like, there's 99.7% the same. And I remember I think it was like the Russian kid. He was like, yeah, well, also we're 90, 90, or we're 70% the same as bananas. So he was trying to say like, no, there is difference between black and white people. But I was like, no, there isn't. In my mind, I'm like, no, there isn't. We're that it's just a social construction. Don't we? We learn about this at UCSD. We're a social construction. Race is social construction. There's no such thing. But again, why did I want to see it that way? Because I had an agenda, I think, but I'm thinking to myself, no, I'm transcending dualistic software like my grandpa teaches. Because again, I just incorporated all my grandpa's teachings into my way of seeing things. But I'm thinking like, no, I'm transcending the ego. But it was actually still my ego. But I didn't know that. Because I saw myself as Jewish, and my ego was, I wanted race mixing. I want to say, no, white and black are the same. Men and women are the same. And, conservatives are, because in my mind, I'm like, I always thought just, conservatives are just Nazis, right? That's the way I always saw it. And like, I was for abortion because I'm like, yeah, they just want to ban abortion because they want to make women into baby makers because they want to maintain the white race. That's what I thought in my head. I wouldn't say this out loud, but this is why I was so leftist, right? Well, I was so liberal. But, okay, so this is kind of the way that I saw things at that time. What was I going to say? I was going to say some other stuff. What was I going to say? So, yeah, at the time I was leftist and I was going to say something, but I forget. All right, but anyways, I was studying with my grandpa. Okay, well, anyways, yeah, I lost my basketball videos, but like I said, I didn't care at the time, right? But then I remember I started studying like the MBTI, right? The Myers-Briggs personality stuff. And at first I thought that I would be an ISTP because I saw that Michael Jordan was an ISTP, and I thought, I was always really good at basketball and stuff, right? But then it said I was an INTP. I took the test and it said INTP, and I remembered, and it said architect. I remembered when I was in the 9th grade, I had taken the test, and it said I was an architect. So I was like, oh yeah, so I'm an INTP, and it said that I had the same type as Einstein and those guys. So I was like, but always in my mind, I never saw myself as that smart. But I was like, well, I did discover the theory of everything, so it makes sense that I have the same personality type as Einstein, right? But then I started studying about INTPs, and it was saying how they're very rational, right? But like I said, my whole life I saw reality as kind of like a dream, right? But so I started like taking this rationalistic stuff, right? And studying the INTP. So I started to want to be more like an INTP, and I was thinking how, because I saw myself as Jewish, I wanted to see Jews as more like INTPs and Jews as more rational. So like I said, I was always for Marxism. So I was thinking like, yeah, it even says that Karl Marx is an INTP. And, I'm an INTP because I always saw religion as kind of like white supremacist because it maintains the status quo and it keeps people, afraid of the afterlife. So they maintain the status quo. And I thought that was white supremacy. So I was always like, so now I had more of an incentive or more underpinning or more of a foundation for what I saw as my anti-religiosity. Because I was like, yeah, it's because I'm an INTP. And I wanted to be like, I'm an INTP, and the SJs, the Guardians, who would be the second quadrant group, whereas INTPs, the NT rationals would be the fourth quadrant. I was like, yeah, the Guardians, they're the religious ones because they want to maintain the status quo, and the second quadrant race is the white race, and they want to maintain the white race, the SJ Guardians, so they maintain religiosity and they maintain the illusion that there's black people and white people and social constructions and stuff. But whereas I'm an INTP, so I see people as individuals, and I've transcended the ego, but they're still stuck in the ego. So, but I'm thinking like, so I'm trying to interpret this as, as based around personality types. But really, again, I think a lot of it had to do with maybe there was an aspect of that's my personality, that I'm an INTP, so I'm not very religious. But also, I think it's because I saw myself as Jewish and I wanted race mixing. So I was also studying like the NFs, and they're the idealists, and I would say that they're the first quadrant, and they're more like the Asians, right? And I was and I was seeing how they tend to be more communist. The first quadrant is more communist, the second quadrant is more fascist, the third quadrant is capitalist, and the fourth quadrant is libertarian. But I was like, yeah, the first quadrant, the idealists, they also tend to be very spiritual and kind of religious. Like the first quadrant and the second quadrant are more good, right? Whereas the third quadrant is rational, and the fourth quadrant is rational. And because like the third quadrant is thinking, emotion, doing, dreaming, and that's breaking out of religion, which is belief, faith, behavior, belonging, which is the second quadrant. And then you move into the fourth quadrant, which is contemplation, passion, flowing, knowing, which I said is philosophy. And I said that would be related to brown people and Hinduism, right? But I was just like, yeah, the idealists, the Asians, the first quadrant, they tend to be kind of spiritual. But spirituality also is white supremacist because I had a friend who I met, his name is Noah, and he was an NF, and he was kind of spiritual. And also my grandpa told me he was an INFP, an idealist. So I was like, yeah, they're spiritual because spirituality is also a part of religion, and that helps to maintain the status quo. But I saw myself as a fourth quadrant and more of a rationalist and anti-spiritual, anti-second quadrant, anti-first quadrant. And I was like, yeah, because we see things as they really are, like Nietzsche and Karl Marx, and we recognize that religion is just a way to manipulate people and stuff. So even though I was seeing reality is like a dream, I think fundamentally my desire to destroy the white race was so intense, and I saw Christianity as maintaining the white race. And I always wanted to see myself as more black because I saw myself as Jewish. I want to see myself as more black. So I was always more into Islam. Like I liked Islam because I was like, I thought it was for race mixing, and I saw it as more black. And I always liked the rappers like Just Allah and Wu-Tang Clan, who were more black and anti-white. And I saw myself as like that too, right? But in my mind, I'm like, yeah, they call the white man the devil, and yeah, I'm a Jewish, and I'm not white. That's the way I wanted to see it. So I was always just like, so I was like, yeah, the SJs and the NFs, those are, I wanted to undermine them and be like, yeah, they're the guardians and the idealists, the first two personality types, they're more religious, and because they want to maintain the status quo, and they're for the white people. But the SPs and the NTs, the guardians and the artisans, we're artistic and we're philosophical, and we're the brown people and the black people, and we're breaking out of religion. And so in a way I wanted to bolster the colored people, the people of color, and kind of undermine and denigrate the white people and the Asians in a way, especially the white people, the second quadrant. So, but now I understand, because I think it's because I saw myself as Jewish and I saw white people as the biggest threat. But so, even though I discovered the theory of everything, I was interpreting my theory within this anti-white framework that I had my whole life. So I'm like, yeah, I see things as they really are, as a Marxist, because so I want to see Marxism as good, because Marxist, yeah, I'm a rational. I'm an INTP, like Karl Marx was, and like Darwin was an INTP, and like Abraham Lincoln. And so I don't see race, and I'm not religious, because religion just maintains the status quo. And so that's why I'm a Marxist, and that's why I'm for open borders, and because I recognize religion just maintains division, like it maintains division between the Christians and the Muslims. But that's really just because Christians are white people and Muslims are brown people, and the reason why they maintain their separate religions is because they want to maintain division so they can maintain their genes. But like Charles Darwin, I can see through all this facade, and I can see through this smoke screen, and I can see it's all just Darwinism. But it's because I'm an INTP and I can recognize this, right? So that's the way that I was seeing things. So, but I'm thinking like I'm an INTP, and that's why. But my point is, my anti-white leftism kind of took over, right? So I'll get to how I started studying with my grandpa, and how I kind of, my grandpa tried to make me spiritual and kind of religious, but more spiritual with his metapsychiatry, but how I tried to undermine it, and I ultimately became a complete Marxist. And I'll get to that. And I'll also get to the basketball DVDs and stuff a little bit, but I can't go too much into detail about that.